There is a strange pattern we see in relationships today, and it plays out again and again, almost with the predictability of a script. A woman meets a man who is steady, reliable, patient, perhaps even understated in the way he carries himself. He doesn't dazzle with theatrics. He doesn't throw fireworks into every conversation, but he is there, solid, constant. And it is precisely that steadiness, that unshowy loyalty, which so many overlook until it is too late. But at first, she believes she can do better. She mistakes stability for dullness, patience for weakness, and kindness for lack of options. He texts back too quickly. He makes himself available. He listens when she speaks. And in a world that has convinced us that excitement is everything, she takes him for granted. She thinks if he is always here, then why bother valuing him? But here is the irony. People never appreciate consistency until it is withdrawn. The man she dismissed, the man she quietly demoted to the background, eventually reaches a point where he no longer waits for her recognition. And when he steps back, when he chooses silence over chasing, when he disappears into the rhythm of his own life, that is when she notices the weight of his absence. It starts subtly. She realizes no one else checks in on her quite like he did. No one else remembers the details he remembered, the little things she mentioned offhand, that he wove into his care for her. She meets men who might be louder, flashier, even more exciting, but they are also self-absorbed, unreliable, transactional, and slowly she begins to see the quiet value of what she once dismissed. And it is in that moment, when she is confronted with the ordinariness of other men, that she begins to miss the one she thought would always be there, the man who didn't perform for her attention, but simply gave himself in the most real and grounded way. Women begin missing the man they took for granted when the illusion of endless options fades, when they discover that what they once labelled boring was in fact the rarest kind of strength, when they find themselves in rooms full of noise but no substance, surrounded by men who promise much but deliver little. It is then often too late that the truth lands heavily. The dependable man they overlooked was the exception, not the rule. And here is the deeper tragedy. Absence teaches lessons. Presence never could. It is not until he is gone, not until he stops answering the phone, not until his attention is directed elsewhere, that she realizes his attention was the most mobile gift she ever had. So the story repeats itself. Women miss the man they took for granted, but often they miss him only in memory, only when his life has already moved on. When we think about relationships in the modern world, there's a curious paradox that emerges time and again. The very qualities that make a man dependable, trustworthy, and safe are precisely the ones that are overlooked, dismissed, or even resented. Consistency is not a glamorous trait. It doesn't set your heart racing in the way unpredictability does. It doesn't play to the shallow thrill of uncertainty. It doesn't leave you second guessing, wondering if he'll text back or if he's interested at all. And because consistency doesn't carry that sense of drama, it's so often taken for granted. The reliable man becomes background noise in a culture that worships noise. He is there, steady and solid, the kind of presence you don't have to question. He remembers to ask how your day was. He notices when you're quieter than usual. He doesn't disappear for days only to reappear with a flimsy excuse. He is not a jigsaw puzzle you have to piece together, nor a riddle you have to solve. He simply is. But here is the problem. People rarely notice the value of something that is always available. Abundance makes us blind. We drink from a well every day without realizing how precious it is, until one morning we wake up, go to draw water, and find it empty. At the beginning of a relationship, a man's attentiveness can feel suffocating. She tells herself, he's too eager, too predictable, too easy. And because we are so conditioned to conflate excitement with drama, his stability feels unremarkable, almost dull. What she doesn't yet understand is that this kind of steadiness is rare. It's not the default. It's not what most men can or will sustain. In fact, it is one of the hardest qualities to find, because consistency requires discipline, self-control, and above all, character. What usually happens is this: she dismisses his steady presence, assuming that because he is always there, he will always be there. She tells herself she has endless time to recognize his value. She assumes his loyalty, is automatic, something woven into the fabric of his being. But loyalty isn't a given, it's a choice. And when he begins to feel that his loyalty has gone unnoticed, when he senses that she confuses kindness with weakness, patience with lack of options, eventually he begins to withdraw. The change is subtle at first. He doesn't stop caring, but he stops overextending. He no longer texts back immediately because he's busy living a life that doesn't revolve around her recognition. He no longer lingers, waiting for crumbs of appreciation. And when she notices this shift, when she realizes that the man who was always so available is no longer on call, the loss begins to sting. This is the irony of consistency. It's invisible until it's gone. The man who checked in every day becomes most noticeable when his check-ins stop. The man who remembered the little things becomes unforgettable when no one else remembers them. The man who was always ready to help becomes irreplaceable when no one else lifts a hand. His absence becomes a kind of haunting presence because she realizes that what she once dismissed as ordinary was in fact extraordinary. There's another dimension to this. The modern dating landscape thrives on the illusion of abundance. Social media, dating apps, endless choice. It all creates the belief that someone better is just around the corner, that if one man doesn't thrill her enough, she can always find another. But options do not equal value. Endless novelty cannot replace depth. And it's in this churn of disposable interactions that the man she overlooked begins to stand out, not because he was flashy, but because he was genuine. It is when she grows tired of the men who offer nothing but surface level charm that she begins to miss the depth of the one she dismissed. She starts to notice that other men don't listen in the same way, don't care in the same way, don't stay in the same way. And the very things she thought were dull, the quick replies, the steady availability, the quiet reliability, suddenly feel like luxuries. What once irritated her now feels like a rare comfort she foolishly cast aside. Consistency is undervalued precisely because it doesn't demand attention. It doesn't make a spectacle of itself, but it is the foundation upon which real love, real security, real intimacy is built. Without consistency, words mean nothing, promises mean nothing, grand gestures collapse under the weight of unreliability, and women who take consistency for granted often learn this lesson the hard way by losing it. The most painful realization is that once a consistent man withdraws, it's rarely temporary. He doesn't do it to play games or manipulate. He does it because he has reached a quiet conclusion that his presence is wasted on someone who cannot recognize its worth. And once he has drawn that line, he does not return to being taken for granted. His silence speaks louder than any argument, and his absence forces her to confront the truth she overlooked for too long. This is how women start missing the man they took for granted, not in the noise of his presence, but in the silence of his absence. They remember the steady hand they once shrugged off. They long for the reliability they once dismissed as dull, and by the time they realize that consistency is the rarest form of love, he has often already gone. The pursuit of excitement has become one of the defining features of modern relationships. We are taught to crave intensity, to equate unpredictability with passion, and to interpret turbulence as a sign of love. Popular culture feeds this fantasy relentlessly. The brooding, mysterious man who is never fully available, whose absence is as intoxicating as his presence, who keeps you guessing, and in doing so keeps you hooked. But the truth is, this kind of excitement is almost always short-lived. It burns brightly, yes, but it burns out quickly, leaving behind nothing but ashes. In contrast, the man who offers stability and substance often seems dull in comparison. He is not playing games. He is not manipulating your attention. He is not constructing elaborate performances to keep you intrigued. He simply is who he says he is. His words align with his actions. His presence is predictable, his behavior reliable, and yet, in the early stages of attraction, this reliability is mistaken for lack of spark. A steady man is often passed over for the thrill of the unpredictable one, because excitement feels addictive in the moment, while stability feels almost too safe. But illusions are temporary. The rush of drama cannot sustain itself. What seems thrilling at first, the unanswered texts, the hot cold attention, the sudden disappearances, followed by grand returns, eventually becomes exhausting. It begins to feel less like romance and more like chaos. And it's usually only at this stage, when the novelty wears off and the exhaustion sets in, that the comparison between the so-called exciting man and the overlooked steady man becomes painfully clear. This is the point at which women begin to miss the man they took for granted. They notice, often belatedly, that the unpredictable man offers little more than performance. His grand gestures are shallow, his words are empty, his presence unreliable. What he delivers in excitement, he lacks in depth. And once the thrill evaporates, what remains is hollowness. It's then that the woman remembers the man who didn't need theatrics to prove his interest, the one whose very reliability she once dismissed as dull. The problem is that excitement is a poor foundation for anything lasting. Relationships built on adrenaline are bound to collapse because adrenaline fades. The men who thrive on keeping women guessing are not thinking about commitment, about care, about long-term partnership. They are thinking about control, about ego, about feeding their own appetite for novelty. But substance is different. Substance is quiet. It is not attention-seeking. It does not demand your constant validation. Substance is the man who shows up when he says he will, the man who means what he says, the man who proves through action that his word is trustworthy. At first, this lack of drama might feel uninspiring, but over time it becomes invaluable, because when life inevitably becomes difficult, as it always does, the thrilling man is nowhere to be found. He is off chasing the next rush, the next conquest, the next game. Meanwhile, the man who once seemed boring is the one you can rely on to stand beside you. And that reliability is not only rare, it is irreplaceable. There's a cruel irony in this dynamic. Many women realize the value of substance only after wasting years on the pursuit of excitement. They look back and see the pattern, the reliable man they dismissed, the exciting man they chased, the disappointment that inevitably followed. And then often too late, they come to see that excitement fades, but reliability endures. What seemed dull in the short term was in fact the foundation for everything they actually wanted in the long term. This realization is often accompanied by regret, because the steady man they overlooked is no longer waiting. He has moved on, building a life without her, pouring his consistency into someone who recognizes its worth. And the woman is left with the sharp awareness that she traded depth for illusion, security for chaos, substance for spectacle. Excitement can be intoxicating, yes, but intoxication wears off, and when it does, reality is all that's left. The reality is that flashy men who thrive on unpredictability rarely make reliable partners. Their attention is conditional, their affection fleeting, their promises weak, and compared to that, the so-called dull man, the one who texted back, who showed up, who stayed, was never dull at all. He was rare. The tragedy is that women often come to this understanding only after the steady man has disappeared. It is in his absence that his quiet strength is recognized. She begins to recall how easy it felt to talk to him, how comforting his presence was, how safe she felt knowing he was there, and she wonders why she ever dismissed those qualities as unremarkable. The answer is simple, because the culture taught her to value spectacle over substance. But substance does not need spectacle to prove its worth. It proves itself in time, in patience, in loyalty. And by the time a woman realizes this truth, by the time she sees that excitement is fleeting and substance is enduring, the man she took for granted may be nothing more than a memory. Absence has a way of cutting through illusions in a manner that presence never quite can. When someone is always available, when their care is a given, it fades into the background like the hum of a refrigerator. You don't notice it. You assume it will always be there. But when it stops, when that constancy is suddenly withdrawn, you feel the silence like a weight pressing on your chest. This is why absence so often teaches lessons that presence cannot. And in the realm of relationships, this truth plays out with painful regularity. A woman takes for granted the man who's always there. He replies quickly, he makes time, he remembers details, he checks in, he gives She doesn't pause to consider the cost of this steady presence, the discipline it takes for him to put her needs before his convenience, the self-control it requires not to play games, the maturity it takes to prioritize commitment over ego. Instead, she interprets his reliability as weakness. Because he doesn't make her chase, she feels he is too easy. Because he doesn't withhold affection, she feels it is less valuable. The irony is almost cruel. The very qualities that make him extraordinary are the ones that cause her to underestimate him. But every man has his threshold. Even the most patient, loyal man eventually realizes that he is being taken for granted. And when he reaches that point, he doesn't shout, he doesn't beg, he doesn't launch into grand speeches about how underappreciated he feels. No, he simply withdraws. He stops making himself endlessly available. He stops pouring effort into a vessel that cannot hold it. He quietly redirects his energy toward his own life, his own purpose, perhaps even towards someone more capable of seeing him clearly. And it is in this silence, this sudden absence, that she feels his value for the first time. The texts that used to arrive without fail no longer appear. The check-ins stop. The emotional safety net she never acknowledged is gone. And suddenly the background hum of his presence becomes deafening by its silence. She begins to notice the hole he has left behind, and the realization dawns. She misjudged him. Absence is the harshest of teachers because it cannot be ignored. Presence can be overlooked, but absence is impossible to miss. It forces reflection. She compares the chaos of other men with the quiet reliability of the one who is no longer there. She remembers how easy it was to talk to him, how grounding it felt to know he was in her corner. She recalls, perhaps with embarrassment, the time she dismissed his care as unexciting, the time she rolled her eyes at his attentiveness, the time she wished he were more aloof, more dramatic, more like the others. And in that reflection, she feels the sting of regret. The lesson is sharp. What she once saw as ordinary was in fact rare. What she once dismissed as easy was in fact difficult to find. And by the time she learns this, it is often too late, because absence does not always invite reconciliation. Sometimes it simply means he has gone for good. The most painful aspect of this realization is that it comes not in the heat of conflict, but in the coldness of indifference. If he were angry, if he were still pleading for her recognition, she might feel that she still mattered to him, but his quiet disappearance tells her something much worse, that she no longer does. The absence is not a strategy, not a game, but a decision. He has chosen to stop offering himself to someone who cannot see his worth, and that decision is final. This is why women often begin missing the man they took for granted, not when he was present, but only once he is gone. Presence can be overlooked, but absence forces clarity. It highlights the gap between what she thought she wanted and what she truly needed. It strips away the illusions of excitement and novelty, leaving her face to face with a stark truth. She had something extraordinary, and she let it slip away. Absence is also powerful because it creates contrast. When she interacts with other men who are inconsistent, unreliable, self-absorbed, the memory of the man who was steady looms larger. Every disappointment with someone new becomes a reminder of what she once had. Every broken promise recalls his unwavering honesty. Every silence that feels cold reminds her of his silence that felt safe. And this contrast deepens the ache of regret, because it proves to her over and over again that he was different. What makes this dynamic even more striking is that the man himself rarely seeks to teach her this lesson. He doesn't withdraw as a tactic. He withdraws as a truth. He has accepted that his efforts are wasted, and he chooses dignity over desperation. In doing so, he inadvertently teaches her the very lesson she refused to learn when he was still there, that consistency, care, and loyalty are the rarest and most precious of gifts. By the time she realizes this, the door has usually closed. Absence has taught her, but the cost of that lesson is finality. She misses him, not because she cannot find another man, but because she cannot find another man like him. And it is in that absence that his true value is revealed, not through his presence, not through his giving, but through the silence that forces her to confront what she has lost. Absence is brutal, but it is honest. And it is in this honesty that the most enduring lessons are learned.